Recognizing the signs that you or someone you love may have a mental disorder is the first step towards getting treatment. The earlier begins, the more effective it can be. But we're looking at different angles of this specific topic. I've just introduced that as one of them. Mental health includes emotional, psychological, and social well being. And we unpack this with our very special guest, uh, Brother Seyed Jamaluddin Miri. Uh, Welcome. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Sister Najma, thank you for having me once more. All my regards to all the listeners and to the Salam Media staff. An honor to be with all of you.
Alhamdulillah. So, when we talk about mental health issues, in men, do you agree that it's more prevalent in women than in men, according to that study?
I think that I haven't studied that. I haven't read that study, but generally we need to speak, of course, mental health in both genders, both women and men. Of course, there is an issue that we need to, address when it comes to mental health issues amongst humanity first and foremost, and Muslim men and women. But there is, I think, if I look from the men perspective, because I'm a man myself, and a lot of my clients are brothers, there is this tendency that we spiritually bypass ourselves as men. Also, women, by the way. I shouldn't say that don't do this thing,
Mm.
because spiritual bypassing you can find in both genders, but there is this notion of, which we spoke about last time. You remember, Sister Najma, about futuwa and
Mhm.
fitri masculinity and noble character aspects of futuwa, that we as men tend to not label our emotions, and we rather channelize them through destructive measures,
Mm.
or through ways that are not fitri. So I think there is a stigma that definitely could be connected to a notion of masculinity, which is not fitri and not, in that sense, rooted in the primary sources of Islam. And also, I think there is a lot of statistics that we don't have, because people tend to not speak about these issues, as men and women,
Right.
of course.
So, do you think the reason is because there's a stereotyping of the genders, and men are less have a less tendency to express their emotions, as it were?
It could be one of them. It could be one of them. I think it's a very multiplex issue. I don't think that it's only on one domain, but definitely stereotypic ways of looking at health. But also, religious and spiritual bypassing could be an issue. I mean, religion is beautiful. We love our deen. We love Islam. We love, to practice our deen. When you spiritually or religious bypass, is kind of like not seeing yourself as a human. And to be human is a holistic thing. We go through trials in life. This is Allah. This is something Allah Subhanahu wa Taala has said to us and told us, that we will be tested, and during that test, it's not uh, uncommon that you sometimes could feel mental health issues, or you can feel anxiety or depression. It's the way we cope with it, and by not speaking about it or not addressing it, not seeking help, it's not a good coping mechanism. And it doesn't make you less of a Muslim if you go through struggles in life related to mental health. Quite the opposite. Allah Subhanahu wa Taala tests those that He loves most. So historically, we didn't have these stereotypical notions when it came to mental health. The spiritual bypassing we see today was not as common historically. Historically, we gave treatment to people who went through mental health issues in the Bimaristans and Darul Shifas, the House of Healings and the House of the Sick. We were the first in the Muslim world to establish psychiatric wards. We gave psychological support. So we didn't marginalize people who had mental health issues. We didn't put them in asylums if they had some depressions or anxieties. Quite
Mm.
the contrary, because we believe in the unseen. We believe in the ukhravi approach as part of the societal fabric. We always saw, at least historically, people who went through different struggles, whether it was mental health related or not, as people who were beloved by Allah, were loved by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And
Mhm.
sometimes even we saw them as closer to Allah than maybe a person who's not going through trials or tribulations in life. So it's about how to handle trials and tribulations, and to bring about awareness to not spiritually bypass ourselves, rather see spirituality as a strength and as a coping mechanism when it comes to dealing with mental health issues, and utilize it rather than just not speaking about mental health issues at all, and
Mhm.
bypass it by thinking that you're a better Muslim if you don't speak about it or don't address it.
Mm. Mm. Or enduring until you get Jannah. You're not meant to suffer.
I mean,
uh,
enduring is
yeah,
yeah. That's
yeah.
a
Uh,
good question. We can speak about it later, inshallah.
yes, I want to go for an ad break, and then let's unpack what you titled as spiritual bypass. I think that's sounds quite interesting. I like the phrase you've coined.
No, it's not me who coined it, sister, but we'll speak more about it.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Salam Media.
Thousands of Syrian Palestinian refugees and Lebanese children do not have access to education. Amman means safety and is a school that provides formal education from kindergarten to grade 9. Africa Muslims Agency aims to provide 650 children with education that will change the trajectory of their lives and their families' lives. Fulfill your intention by fulfilling their dreams. Donate 16,000 Rand per child or any amount. Go to Africa muslimsagency.co.za or call us on 011 834 8685. Africa Muslims Agency, empowering, educating, inspiring.
Approximately 785 million people in this world do not have access to safe, clean water. In developing countries, around 80% of all illnesses are due to contaminated water and poor sanitation. Don't let dirty water end a life. Build a water well. In Bangladesh, Malawi, Nepal, Zimbabwe, or here at home in South Africa, donate to Penny Appeal's Thirst Relief Project to bring safe, clean water to communities around the world. www.pennyappeal.org.za or call 031 1100 573. Penny Appeal. Small change, big difference.
When the perfect blend of stylish decor, exquisite halal cuisine, and warm hospitality come together, it could only mean Al Bayt Lodge, your true home away from home. Al Bayt is the ideal heaven for families, business people, and tourists with its 4-star family rooms and other luxurious facilities, conveniently situated close to Port Elizabeth Airport, the beach, and other amenities. Your stay will be truly unforgettable, as you'll be taking home lasting memories of the warm hospitality, the serenity and tranquility that Al Bayt has to offer. For reservations, call 041 583 6415 or visit www.albaytlodge.co.za.
Give charity without delay, for it stands in the way of calamities. For child-headed households in Bloemendal in the Eastern Cape, the daily diet consists of white bread and a carton of cheap juice or sugar water, known locally as the poppy water diet. Make a difference to that one child or family. The Al Fida Foundation has over the past 13 years worked on the ground and gathered the largest database in the Eastern Cape region of Muslim Zakah recipients. Phone our offices at 041 484 1288 or visit our website at www.alfida.co.za. The Al Fida Foundation, your social investment partner in the Eastern Cape.
Kids these days are smart, and when you're competing for their attention against their smartphones, you need to make smart choices, like using Sunfoil triple refined pure sunflower oil in every meal you make. It's naturally cholesterol-free and approved by the Heart and Stroke Foundation as part of a balanced eating plan. So whether you're cooking, frying, or baking, you get the great tasting results that'll get their attention faster than the latest app. And if that doesn't work, change the Wi-Fi password. Sunfoil. Now we're cooking.
It's a new beginning. It's a new era. Salam Media. Humanitarian journalism.
My very special guest on Mid Morning Talk this morning is Seyed Jamaluddin Miri, and we are discussing men and mental health. I think we need to look at what mental health issues could be, and that is the depression, anxiety, PTSD, trauma, bipolar disorder, borderline personality disorder, mood disorder, and I think these terms are well known, but it's very important for us to be cautious on what that diagnosis actually is and recognizing those symptoms, then we can talk about how to deal with them, which is what we spoke about. You just touched on it before the break. Am I right, Brother Seyed?
Exactly. Good summary. Good summary. And also one thing, Sister Najma, to all of our excellent listeners, brothers and sisters, we're more than the labels. So let's say
Right.
when we diagnose something, let's say you have ADHD or some form of neurodiversity, you're more than that. Sometimes we live in a society where we're labeled, like your identity becomes that diagnosis. Now, diagnosis sometimes can be of value to know, know more about yourself, maybe get the proper help or support or treatment, but it doesn't define your whole character. And that's the thing that I think we need to learn from our Islamic history. During those days when we lived in Fitri society, where the divine was centered, the divine was centered in our society's fabric, we always look at humans back then as holistic creatures. And this holistic approach is very important. One part of it is perhaps that you may go through some struggles, you might have mental health, but you're much more than that. But we need to speak about the struggle and find ways to cope with it without bypassing it emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, or for that matter, look at it as something that is stigmatized, inshallah.
Right, absolutely. So, and then there's the social stigma, there's professional stigma, there's cultural stigma. All of this is, do you, would you agree that this affects men more than it would women?
I shouldn't. I don't think we need to speak like that, Sister Nejma. I think that it affects both men and women, but I think it's important as men to speak about it, and I think it's important for women. I don't want to put this dichotomy, like this men and women struggle. We're supporting each other. We as Muslims look at men and women as complementary. We need each other. So I think that it's a general issue, both amongst men and women, that we need to address when it comes to mental health. As a man, I can see amongst brothers that there is a lot of stigma, and I know there is amongst sisters as well. Now, speaking from a male perspective, the way that we cope with it, if it's not coped with in a fitri way, or in a Islamic way, is ways that won't bring you towards healing and won't allow Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bring you towards healing, because all healing comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? The way that men cope with it is to bypass it, to channelize it in destructive ways, whether it's through addiction, addictive behavior patterns, whether it's from form of aggression, whether it's micro or macro aggression, and many other ways. So I think by breaking this aspect of being able to allow men to speak about mental health, then we can break also things that are not fitri approaches towards health, or reconnect men to fitri masculinity instead of toxic masculinity.
Right. So I agree with you. We shouldn't be talking about men and women separately when it comes to mental health, because it's human beings, it's human nature. However, I think in terms of the subject matter today, and because we focused on men's mental health, do you feel that there's a certain type of socializing that might lead to a different type of approach for men to mental health as opposed to women?
It's a very good question, and it's a complex question and a complex answer. I won't be able to give like a 1-minute answer on that. I think socialization is part of it. Socialization is one of the biggest issues of how we disconnect ourselves from fitra. When we come to dunya, we are in a state of fitra. This pure state of being connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's divine names and attributes. This pure state, this innate pure disposition of ours. Through socialization in dunya, we disconnect from our fitra. That's why it's important with good suhbah and good socialization and good tarbiyah, in order to keep the youth or the child as purely connected to the fitra as possible. This is very impossible, very difficult. And then you can relate that to mental health, that through socialization, and in this session with you today, in this interview, we're speaking about men and mental health. Through socialization, this creates a narrative that in order to be a good man, you shouldn't have any health issues as well. Just cope with it, just be with it. Don't speak about it, don't make fuzz out of it.
There's,
Don't
yeah,
make a big thing out of it. Be a man up. That's
exactly.
what
That's
they
it.
say to young boys when they cry because they feel a loss. Like a young boy
Exactly.
feels a loss or trauma. Why are you crying? Man up. Well, we know
Yeah.
that crying could be a way of biologically cleaning yourself from anxiety. And at the same time, it's very like prophetic to cry. I mean, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he did cry when he lost his son, right? We know
Hmm.
that narration. It's about balance. You shouldn't overdo anything. You shouldn't just cry, but you shouldn't also just bypass it. So yes, if you don't allow men to be connected to all their emotions that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given them, including crying sometimes if needed, then you will create a disposition where men can tend to go into mental health issues and instead channelizing it in a destructive way. Crying is one
Hmm.
way of actually coping with distress, which is
Right.
for me masculine if you do it in a proper way according to the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this whole notion of man up,
Mm.
this is not a good, because what is man up? Of course, we should be men. We should protect our family, protect the society. But at the same time, to be man is to be gentle towards yourself and towards others. To be gentle towards yourself is to acknowledge that we sometimes can suffer and we can have mental
Right.
health, and it's okay to ask for help. It's okay.
Absolutely. So it's very important then to recognize the symptom, and that's where perhaps the person that's suffering from a certain type of mental health issue will not be aware of it, but their loved ones are, because there's a
Yeah.
change in behavior, or there's a certain pattern that they've noticed, and then making them aware of it. And that's where the challenge is, where
Yeah.
are you prepared to hear that your behavior has changed? Is there something wrong? So I
Yeah.
think the approach, it's for one thing, it's the person himself recognizing it, or their loved ones recognizing it because they don't see it. So,
Mm.
and that's where the difficulty is. And if we're talking about fitra, brother said, then again we go back to the ego, right? And the
Yeah.
self. And what connection do you have with that, in order for one to be able to recognize and accept that there is a problem and I need to do something about it?
100%. And as you say, we need the social support system there. I mean, if you look at the maqasid al-Sharia, the objectives of Sharia, it's all about bringing it from micro level to macro level. Western societies are very individualistic, while our Islamic, fitri societies were collectivistic and individualistic at the same time. It was a combination. You as a
Right.
person, you have certain duties you need to do, and the society has some that needs to do. And then the maqasid al-Sharia, you have the objective of nasl, taking care of your children and offspring. You have the notion of aql, to have a sound, a mind,
Mm,
nafs, to have a sound behavior, sound ego, sound self. All these
mm,
things were part of the societal fabric. That's
right.
why we need social support systems in establishing a healthy society with healthy citizens. And if our let's say family members or our society bypass us as well, or don't acknowledge the mental health issues that a person might have, that will not help the person in his or her healing trajectory. So this is a
Correct.
community awareness that we need to do,
Hmm.
not only with the individual but also in the collective. And speaking about men and mental health is one way of actually addressing the issue. There's a lot of men who also commit suicide.
Right.
Unfortunately, this is a big pandemic. Of
Mm.
course, women as well,
Hmm.
and we need to address it for both genders, of course.
Right. We have a question from a viewer. The question is, what is causing constant headaches? Have been to many doctors, physicians. So, from a mental health perspective,
Yeah,
there's a lot that we can point to, right,
exactly.
Dr. Said? Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not a doctor, by the way. I'm a
Sorry,
counselor.
I said doctor by
Yeah,
mistake.
I
I
almost went
say
to the right.
you will be,
Alhamdulillah.
you will be,
As a
inshallah.
counselor, headache. I mean, it depends, sister. I mean, it's difficult for me to answer. We need to do a proper
Mm,
investigation in order to know. It could be physical, lack of water, lack of diet, lack of sleep. It could be anxiety. It could be, psychosomatic. It could be physical, depending on what has triggered the headache. So it's so difficult for me to answer that question without a proper investigation. Well, the
Right.
headaches generally are a symptom of something. And the problem, I tend to think, in Western medicine and Western psychology only focuses on removing the symptom, not to understand where the symptom comes from. And
The
that's the
cause,
difference
yes.
between an Islamic understanding of disease with a very allopathic and almost like a mechanical way of looking at disease, which is almost, unfortunately, the normative approach of Western medicine today. So from an Islamic point of view, we will ask, first and foremost, we recognize that the headache comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like everything we get, whether it's diseases or mental health issues or distress. And then the secondary causation is to resolve it, right? But in order to resolve it, we need to know what triggered the symptom. What is the background, which is the holistic approach. I hope that was a good answer enough. Allahu Alam. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best.
Right. Well, I think when we talk about mental illness or mental health issues, rather, it is a sign and symptom of something else going on in the body, right? So that is the cause mainly. And if we look at the holistic approach of healing, then we know that there could be some underlying stress issue, if you like, for the want of a better explanation. And this is how it manifests in the body. So from what I understand, Brother Seyed has just said, is that one needs to know where it's coming from and then see whether it needs to be treated physically, or do we dig deeper and find answers, you know, from the holistic perspective, meaning mind, body, soul. And so after the break, I want to talk about, you know, the symptoms that, when I say men, I know it's and women, but I know that there's, for example, you know, the sign and symptoms of mental illness would be perhaps anger, irritability, or aggression, and quite different in females. We talk about that after the break. Keep your questions going, and remember to subscribe to our YouTube page on Salam Media.
Jazakallah.
This is Salam Media.
For a long time, we've lived in a centralized world, where institutions held the all-important data and confirmed all transactions. Those times are over. Welcome to Libertas Group, a blockchain development company boasting an ecosystem that continually redefines the way we do business. Our blockchain is decentralized, making it immune to hacking or alteration, putting the power back in your hands with no middleman so you can focus on the growth of your business. Libertas, the simplest investment choice you'll make.
For every child who lost a parent.
For every refugee who lost their home.
For every community without water.
For every person searching for a way to give, Africa Muslims Agency has been at your service for 35 years, connecting hearts and changing lives. Thank you for helping us to serve the needy since 1987. Support our journey by donating to Africa Muslims Agency as we commemorate 35 years of empowering, educating, and inspiring.
With so many investment options today, it's only natural that you might feel a little confused which route to take. Should I buy shares or should I invest in gold bullion? Randery Jewelers now brings you the Zahab coin, an alternative to the Kruger Rand. The Zahab coin, a solid wealth protector in its purest form of 24-karat gold, is the safest way to protect your wealth. So don't just sit there and watch your paper money depreciate. Change to gold. Call Randery Jewelers now at 031-202-4701 or visit www.rjcoin.co.za, situated at 151 Essenwood Road, Musgrave, Durban. Randery Jewelers, the family name you can trust.
Devastating floods in Pakistan have washed away villages, claimed the lives of more than 1,000 people, damaged nearly 1 million homes, and left over 33 million people in desperate need of help. As the catastrophe unfolds, Islamic Relief is on the ground, reaching people with life-saving aid. Our team are working tirelessly to deliver food and shelter. Your support is urgently needed now to help save more lives. Donate now to Islamic Relief.
Breaking stereotypes, moving boundaries, joining hands. Salam Media. Humanity sets the agenda.
So when one looks at the behavior patterns or what the signs could be in terms of recognizing mental illness, then I mentioned just a few: anger, irritability, or aggressiveness. And that can be common in females as well. But we find, do you agree that females would be more withdrawn and, withdrawn to silence, if you like, as opposed to what a male would do? And that's just the way we are created in terms of our demeanor and disposition.
Yeah, I mean, men tend to externalize more, yes, and women tend to internalize more. And I think that, in a sense, we take it for granted that because we do behave in this way, then this is normal. But then what is normal? I mean, you need some aspect of aggression. You need anger, but it needs to be
Correct.
balanced, because if you have anger in a balanced way, then you're actually a courageous person. But if you're too much of anger in you, then you become you become quite aggressive instead, which is toxic. So we tend to sometimes, because of socialization and norms of the society not being fitri today, we tend to think that it's normal to act in a certain way, whether it's to externalize or internalize. But it's about balance, because all things and struggles we go through life is an inner struggle and an outer struggle, and we need to balance
Right.
these. But if we're too
Right.
much in the inner struggle and we forget about dunya, that's not good. And are we too much in the dunya struggle and we externalize too much? That's not good either. We need a proper balance, and Islam is the deen of moderation and mizan. So balance is there. We need to be spiritual warriors and also physical warriors as well when it's needed. And that's the combination that we need to bring in order to have good mental health, or health as a whole. And that's very important for us to have in mind.
Right. And it's important to note that one doesn't have to struggle to be a spiritual warrior. I think that's where it's misunderstood.
I mean, struggle is part of life, right? We all struggle in different ways. It's about how to cope with it and to bypass not asking for help or to be open with it. It's not good either. Of course, like, you don't need to mention everything. Some things Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala covers for you, of course. That's the reality. But at the same time, asking for help from a rafiq, from a sound companion, as Imam Ghazali mentions it, or from a alim or alima, or from a mental health professional, it's perfectly fine. And actually, that could bring you closer to Allah, because Allah has put you through this trial. Sometimes when we're in the trial, we don't understand it, and then you need somebody who could see and explore the trial with you from a bird's eye view, from an audit perspective. And that's what a counselor can help a person who's going through struggle. Yeah. And you know what, sister? Everything is qadr Allah. And we can look at trials as accepting qadr Allah. When we deny it, then we're not accepting qadr Allah. We're actually just not reflecting upon qadr Allah. To accept qadr Allah is actually to be with the struggle, to acknowledge the struggle, to even speak about the struggle. That's where acceptance of qadr Allah comes. And then you can, instead of doing hijrah from qadr Allah, which is the trial to go through, by acceptance, reflecting, even asking help, you can do hijrah towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by actually allowing the trial, the mental health issues, to bring you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But in order to do that, sometimes we need to speak about it and reflect with a second person that could help reflect. And then through that, we can do the tafakkur necessary to understand the hikmah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings about in all of our trials in life.
Right. Now, when one looks at reasons for why men would respond differently to stresses and strains and challenges in life, is perhaps because, if I can use one example, what could cause this? Financial stress, loss of a loved one, a spouse perhaps, or losing one's income, because it's his role naturally to be the financial protector and provider. So that then is devastating for the male in his role, and in fact would lead to lots of feelings of inadequacy, and then not express it, because again, am I supposed to complain about not having to cope with, for example, the loss of a loved one, because you're not supposed to cry, you're not supposed to expose your outwardly express your emotions, or the other example that I gave of loss of an income.
Yeah, these are great examples, and I think one of the main pandemics in the secular world today is the fact that the role of the man has been demolished, and today the man and the woman, we don't apply sacred manhood and sacred womanhood, which is complementary roles. We complement each other.
Correct.
And when it comes to the man, for instance, man used to be the breadwinner, right? But if you look at the migrants coming to West, I live in Sweden, for instance. We can take Sweden as an example, but really we can find it in all Western countries. When migrants come, suddenly the child has easier to integrate into the society. Generally, youths learn the language quicker, they network quicker, and actually the man becomes lower, like becomes like the whole nucleus of the family becomes up and down, in a sense, turns up and down. And suddenly the man doesn't have the role anymore of being the provider for the family, and loses that. And at the same time, we don't address that. We don't speak about that, because we're not supposed to, in the Western context or the secular context, speak about masculinity, because all masculinity is a problem in the secular notions today, modern notions today. What we as Muslims are addressing is toxic masculinity. What we believe in fitri masculinity as something good. We believe in that. While if you look at the secular notions today, they see all types of masculinity as toxic, and they want to demasculinize. While we want to establish the masculinity connected to the fitri masculinity once more. We want to revisit that and revive the fitri masculinity and break toxic masculinity in that sense. And then the man, living in a society where you're not acknowledged even as a fitri man anymore, with your fitri responsibilities. At the same time, you face racism and discrimination and Islamophobia. At the same time, you're facing a lot of challenges in integrating. Then you can get mental health issues, but if you don't address them and don't speak about them, then they can turn into channelizing them in a destructive way. So we need to speak about what has happened with the notion of masculinity, the way we discuss masculinity. But as Muslims, instead of acknowledging the demasculinization process, we should speak about fitri masculinity, sound health masculinity, according to the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Is the best example of how we can be as men, as leaders, as holistic leaders, not like only leading in one domain, but also listening. How can we learn to listen as men? How can we learn to be empathetic and acknowledging, whether it's our sisters or our wives or our children or our colleagues or other brothers' emotions and feelings? To look at the prophetic example is the best model to apply, and to understand what happens when you suddenly don't have that role as the leader of the community or the breadwinner anymore, which is what we see in West. And then a lot of fathers are not even involved in the upbringing of their parents, of their
children.
That's also something we need to address. Like the parenting should also be the man's responsibility, together with the woman, because the children needs to both see the woman and the man. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was always there for his children. He was always a father. He was always in prison. Which we can see in his relationship with Fatima radiallahu anha, for instance. So we have the model in how to be a man from the prophetic model. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. And I think perhaps we can take a bit more time in illustrating that, so that we can equip ourselves with that information. Although we know it, we are aware of the Sunnah, but when you talk about it in relation to fitra and what it is, what that role is supposed to be, and how one is supposed to conduct oneself in order to feel that it's okay to not be okay as a man.
It's okay. It's okay. I do my best. I'm trying my best. Continue. There's a lot of issues that are facing the older generation. For instance, that I see with elder people who used to have like a role in the society, and then suddenly they lose it. So allowing older men to speak about these issues. I'm not as strong anymore, physically or even mentally or emotionally, and it's okay. It's okay. Different ages have different wisdoms. With age comes hikmah. It comes maturity. Maybe you're not as fit, but you can provide for the society in a different way. Don't see masculinity as a fixated thing when it comes to this is the only role you can take. A man can take many different roles, many different. One is to, of course, be a breadwinner, but the second is also to just be human. It's okay. It's fine. But this is something that we need to address both on the micro level and the macro level. Because when the society is attacking the whole aspect of speaking about masculinity, we need to say, yes, we're against toxic masculinity, but we're for fitri masculinity. Toxic masculinity is to bypass yourself, to not label your emotions the way that the Prophet did, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is to not acknowledging your trials or other people's trials. So that's toxic masculinity, pure aggression. But we need to be courageous. We need to, to support our families, and we need to protect the society, of course. But when you take that role away from the fitri notion of being a man or a woman for that matter, then what happens? Mental health issues. And then you cannot speak about it, because then we have the bypassing, which is something that we didn't have historically in Islamic thought and in history. This is actually something my very subjective, and I don't have any research on this system, Najma, but I do think that these are some of ideas that we have been internalizing as part of colonization of the mind. These are some colonial notion that we still have kept even after colonial time, because we still live in a post-colonial time. Because if we look at how we looked at mental health in the Muslim world pre-colonial time, we didn't stigmatize. While in West, pre-colonial time, they used to, and not everybody, by the way. I don't like to speak about West as a homogenic thing. There are, the Greek people were Westerners in a sense, and the Greek thought had a lot to offer to the history of knowledge. But with that said, if you look at the Judeo-Christian societies pre-colonial time, they used to put, people with mental health issues in asylums in the outskirts of the town and marginalize them and stigmatize them. That was not the case in majority of the Muslim world. So we need to revisit that and understand and perhaps decolonialize our minds as well when it comes to speaking about mental health. Mental health is actually please go ahead. Please go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No. I think I made my point. I was just saying that I was just reiterating myself that all trials in life is a way to come closer to Allah. It doesn't mean that you should bypass it. You should accept it, but you should also be able to label it and also ask for help if you need it.
Right. After the break, we look at the symptoms which are listed in the introduction of the program and see how it's definitely not tangible, and that's why it's so difficult to perhaps even know or diagnose.
COVID-19. Over 23% of South African households experienced hunger last summer. At SANZAF, we aim to ease the hunger struggles of those in need by providing freshly prepared meals daily. You can be part of this by donating towards the SANZAF Meals Project. Visit sanzaf.org.za or call us on 011 834 6046. SANZAF, changing lives through development and relief.
Online schooling? Why not? Kurtuba Online Academy is the leading global online Islamic school from grade R to matric, offering South African caps and international syllabus. And it doesn't stop there. We also offer online madrasa for every grade. For more information, visit www.kurtubaonline.co.za. Kurtuba Online Academy, the leading global online Islamic school.
Reliable access to clean water could save thousands of lives each day. With proper sanitation and easy access to fresh, clean water, communities can flourish. Our Thirst Relief Appeal provides clean water to communities in Asia, Africa, and the Middle East by building deep wells and providing sustainable water and hygiene solutions. A monthly donation of as little as 700 Rand could build a well for a community in need. That's only 23 Rand a day. Donate today. www.pennyappeal.org.za or call 031 11 00 573. Penny Appeal. Small change, big difference.
Discover the Africa of your dreams and surround yourself with her spectacular beauty. Relax beneath her serene sunsets and explore wildlife at its natural best. It's where the pride of Africa comes together. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve. Get to know the Big Five or cruise on an elephant safari game drive. Interact with lion and tiger cubs and enjoy world-class halal cuisine while we pamper you during your 5-star stay. Indulge in the true African experience. For reservations, call now on 042 203 1400 or visit kwantu.co.za. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve, the place of gathering.
Listen to something fresh. Listen to Salam Media.
You're with Najma Kota on Mid Morning Talk, and my very special guest in our mental health wellness segment of the program is Brother Seyed Jamaluddin Miri. We're talking about men and mental health. So I was talking about those symptoms that I listed, like depression, anxiety, borderline personality disorder, mood disorder. These are all scientifically, if you like, diagnosed disorders and conditions. So, and it has to be properly treated, I beg your pardon, properly spoken about and then diagnosed clinically, right? So all of those become very difficult to pinpoint as non-clinicians, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yet one can see it in one's behavior. So what I'm getting at is that it's not tangible as a headache would be, for example. However, recognizing where this leads to, in other words, if there is a change in the behavior, I think I mentioned this earlier in terms of what changes do you see in yourself. Now, when you talk about going back to, the fitra, being more conscious or conscientious of what it is that you're dealing with when there are challenges in life, but you also need to recognize that it's important to get the clinical help, if not from a clinician, at least, a counselor or perhaps even an imam or an alim that's there that could guide you towards feeling better and getting in touch with one's inner struggles.
Yes, for sure. And I mean, if we look at a lot of these diagnoses that you mentioned, I mean, they're very complex. I mean, it's easy to see a person who is sitting in a wheelchair. You can see this person cannot walk. You can see it, and then you can give the support that person needs. For instance, you can make the entrance to the masjid wider, but when it comes to a person who has different, whether it's neurodiversity, diagnosis or symptoms, or whether it's mental health issues, it's not, as you said, tangible. You can't see it always. You can look perfectly fine, like from the eyes point of view, So it's kind of like understanding the complexity of it. A person can be fully functionable in one domain and still have mental health issues.
Absolutely.
I mean, one non-fitry way that we tend to cope with mental health issues is to work more, just to not feel the pain that we're going through, right? Or we go to addictive behaviors that we might not see as something of addiction. Like working is a virtue if it's balanced, but if you're overdoing it, then it's not a virtue, then it becomes a vice. So it's kind of like understanding that maybe you cannot see that this person has a mental health issue, but you could maybe feel it or sense it, or even by interacting with the person, understand that now there is an issue there. And then to be a supportive rafiq, a companion, to be a mirror for that person, and to break actually the notion of not accepting that a society perhaps are stigmatizing mental health, because
Yeah.
this is actually nothing that should be stigmatized. At the contrary, the person who goes through trials is probably much closer to Allah in many sense than what we as people who are being in a phase of not going through struggles are. Allahu Alam, we never know who's closest to Allah. Only Allah knows that. But we know for sure that Allah tests those that He loves most. Look at the stories of the Anbiya, of the prophets. Many of them were tested. All of them almost were tested, all of them were
Right.
tested in a sense. And they
Right.
were the most beloved. They were on the highest maqam, spiritual state, and closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We can all agree on that the prophets were the closest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when it comes to maqam, spiritual states. And even they were tested. So that's where
Correct.
we can, land. And I think that understanding that it's not a tangible thing, it's a good way to be more supportive. Because sometimes we think this person, it's fully functionable, but beneath that function, it could be a lot of struggles and hardship as well.
Right. So when we speak about a message from Quran and Sunnah, what stands out for me is tawakkul. And one can expand on this so much. And I know we're just about 4 minutes before the end of this interview. However, perhaps you can just elaborate on that for us.
I think that tawakkul and also sabr are great tools for our healing trajectory. And to always understand that there is wisdom in everything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put us through. But to also understand that the wisdom can sometimes be blurred from our sight through socialization and dunyavi socialization.
Right.
And to understand that the dunyavi socialization and all these norms that are not fitri norms and that are not norms that comes from the Sharia and the will of Allah and the law of Allah are actually just man-made. And there is the notion of manhood. When we speak about men should not show emotions, should not speak about mental health, that's
Absolutely.
not the way that's not a fitri approach. Quite the contrary, Allah has given you that for a reason. And by having faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's, qadr, and also to have faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy, that disease could be a mercy. And Imam Ghazali actually criticized in the Ihya Ulumuddin and in the Kimya Sadat, the summary of Ihya Ulumuddin, he criticizes the physicians of his time and telling them, you guys are only focusing on giving medication. Wow, maybe this melancholy that this brother is going through, or sister for this matter, is a way for Allah to take away the interest of dunya so that this person can come closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and think about akhir. This is statements from Imam Ghazali, and his criticism of his generation's physicians is similar to what we can see in modern medicine. We just medicate. Now, I'm not against medication because sometimes it's needed, but it's not the only aim. You cannot just take away the symptom. You need to understand where is the root cause. What is the hikmah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And that's where Imam Ghazali gives us some clues. The hikmah could be that this is a way for you to come closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And by coming closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we shouldn't let dunya take over. For sure.
Right.
And a lot of our depression is when dunya is not favorable for us. Then even I'm not perfect. I'm sitting here saying a lot of things, but I wrestle with these things every day, dear Sister Najma. Best to believe it, we all wrestle with it. Like such a small thing like football can make me sad because I love football.
Right.
And I'm really
Sure.
let's cheer from Morocco tomorrow, by the way, dear brothers and
Right.
sisters. Cheer for
Okay,
Morocco.
we'll remember that.
Senegal lost yesterday. I was so sad because I always cheer for all Muslim countries, Senegal,
Right.
Morocco, of course, South Africa. If you guys play, I will cheer for you guys. But in the end, it's only football. You understand what I'm saying? So we need dunya, but we need to have a balanced relationship. And maybe that mental health issue is helping you to get a balanced relationship into dunya. With dunya, we think, because mortal objects will always disappear. The only thing that is lasting forever is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's where tawakkul and sabr comes. And with sabr, hikmah will come in front of your eyes. That firasa and that insight, when you less think it will come, it will come. I have been through it. I remember I got tinnitus a couple of years ago, Sister Najma. It's like a sound in my ear because I had some problems with my ear. So I always hear the sound. Bzzz. In the beginning, I was like, Oh, I can't handle it. I was depressed. But with sabr and with help, I went to therapy, by the way. I got
Right.
clinical help. And actually, even sometimes medication can help. It doesn't resolve everything, but it could help you to cope for a moment while you do the therapy work and psychologically work and spiritual work. Actually, the hikmah came after 1 2 years. And I started to understand that every time I get frustrated, the tiny to sun becomes higher. So I need to be
Aha.
calm. It's like a
Right.
volume, like regulator.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that's
Yes.
where
Yes.
the hikmah came. Okay, Allah wants me to go through this so I don't get frustrated. Or maybe I
Aha.
shouldn't go to my previous lifestyle. Once in the life when I was in Jahiliyyah, I used to go to concerts, and that's not good because that's not a place of khair or a place where things are halal. I should just be in places where things are halal and relationships are khair. So the hikmah came after a while. But today
Mhm.
it's all about fast fix, fast fix. That's why we think
Correct.
medication will resolve everything. But
Yes.
sabr is nothing quick. But with time, hikmah will come, and that's where we can understand that the mental health issue is a way perhaps to bring us closer to Allah. But we need to speak about it as men and women, or else we won't perhaps figure it out ourselves. That's why you said yourself, maybe we should go to an alim or a counselor or a psychologist or a sheikh to get that spiritual and psychological support for us to understand. Because if you're in the middle of the tornado, you won't understand that the tornado is killing people around you. Because in the middle of the
Right.
tornado is quite peaceful. The eye of
Right.
tornadoes are quite peaceful. But
Right.
if another person sees it from a bird's eye view, maybe they can guide you to go beyond the tornado and actually learn from the experience.
A wonderful note to end this interview on. Jazakallah khair, Brother Seyed Jamaluddin Miri. Always a pleasure to have you on my program. We look forward to inviting you back, inshallah, when Mid Morning Talk with Najma Kota is back in January, inshallah.
We will miss your program, Sister Najma. Thank you for inviting me. You're doing such excellent work. All my salams to Salam Media and to all listeners all over the world. An honor to be with all of you. And please forgive me for any shortcomings from my side. If I said anything wrong, rest assured the mistakes are solid in mine. And if anything good came from this, it's all from Allah. It has nothing to do with me. An honor to be with you, Sister Najma. Jazakallah khair.
Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Okay, and that's about wraps up this edition of Mid Morning Talk with Najma. Stay with Salam Media. I'm sure there's a very, very interesting programming to follow in the rest of the month of December. Stay with us. I'll be back with you next year, inshallah. I look forward to it already. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.